Welcome to installing SQL Server Integration Services. There's a couple of different ways that you can install SQL Server Integration Services. The easiest and most common way is going to be to simply use the graphical installer. A second option is to do a command line installation, which will then install integration services without displaying any prompts on the screen. The graphical installer displays a nice wizard on the screen, which I'll show you as part of the demonstration. The nice thing about the graphical installer is it requires no additional preparation and no additional research to find out various command line switches to make it work. You simply launch the installer and walk through the wizard. This makes the installation extremely easy. The downside to the graphical installer is that it's a non-repeatable process, in that there's no way to guarantee that every single time you run through the process, it's going to be exactly the same. If you're deploying a large number of servers, this is not the way to do it, as you have the potential for having a very different configuration each time. However, this is very useful for one-time installations, if you're simply installing integration services as a one-off installation without doing a mass deployment across multiple machines. Let's go ahead and take a look at the graphical installer and see how it works. On the screen, you can see the installation wizard for SQL Server 2012. This is being run on a Windows Server 2012 machine that is part of an Active Directory domain. I've already launched the installation wizard and brought us to the installation center. Click on the installation option on the left, and now clicking on the new standalone installation or add features to an existing installation option. This will begin the installation wizard. Once the setup rules are complete, we can click OK. This will continue the installation process. As part of this process, you can opt to install the SQL Server product updates. If you choose to do so, that's okay. My demo machines are not connected to the internet, so leaving this option checked won't do anything but waste time. So I'll go ahead and uncheck that and then click Next. At this point, the installer will install the setup files. Once this operation is complete, we can continue the process. When the setup wizard finally launches, you'll start by going through the setup support rules. Once this rule check is complete, you'll be able to move on to the next step in the installation. As the rule check is complete, we can move on. Before we do so, we should make sure that these warning messages that we see are acceptable. Because I've run through this wizard several times in this lab environment, I know what these problems are. In this case, the Microsoft.NET Application Security is warning us that we can't connect to the internet and verify the root certificate authority. The second warning is the Windows Firewall. The installer is reporting the Windows Firewall is enabled and to make sure that the appropriate ports are going to be open. We can ignore both of these warnings in this lab. On the product key page, we can select the edition that we want, in this case the evaluation version. If we have a product key, we could enter it on the product key page. We have to agree to the license terms, and then we can continue forward. We're going to do a SQL Server feature installation. This is going to let us install the integration services service so that we can use it. On the feature selection page, the only feature we need to select is the integration services service. This will allow us to install integration services and configure it at a later time to connect to whatever SQL Server instance we wish to use to store our information for our integration services repository. If we don't configure it to talk to an instance, we won't be able to store packages in the MSDB database of an instance. Instead, we'll have to resort to leaving those packages sitting on the integration services server's hard drive. Once we've selected integration services, we can click Next. The next screen to appear is the disk space requirements screen. You'll notice it skipped the installation rules screen. That's because there are no installation rules that have to be checked when only installing integration services. If we were installing integration services as part of another installation, for example with the SQL Server database engine, then the installation rules would need to be checked. We're okay with our disk space requirements. We have plenty of free space. We can then click Next, and we're taken to the server configuration. On this screen, we can select the username and password that's going to be used to start the integration services service. Typically, we would leave this as the default account, which is the ntservice/msdts server account. However, if we need integration services running under a domain account for some reason, we can change the account by simply selecting the drop-down menu, selecting Browse, and selecting an account from the domain or a local Windows account. We would then need to specify the password. For this walkthrough, I'm going to leave it with the default account. Because the default account is a managed account, we don't need to specify a password. SQL Server is going to take care of that for us. We leave the startup account as automatic because we want integration services starting whenever the server starts. We click Next, and we come to the error reporting screen. We can check this or not depending on our corporate policies. We go to the installation configuration rules, and we can see that that check is completed successfully, so we can move on. We get to the Ready to Install screen, and we've got a few pieces of information here. We can see a summary of what we're going to be doing, shown at the top right, as well as a config file shown at the bottom right. If we needed to install additional integration services servers, we could use the file shown in that box below to tell other SQL Server installation processes what features should be installed. Once we click Install, the installation process begins. Once the installation process is complete, at that point, SQL Server Integration Services is installed and ready to be used. The command line installer can be used as well to install SQL Server Integration Services. This does require additional preparation because we need to set up a config file or use command line switches, one or the other. There are two different ways that it can be installed depending on what your requirements are and how you want to get things configured. Using a configuration file is much easier because all you simply need to do is specify the configuration file as a command line parameter, instead of specifying various command line parameters. The nice thing about using either one of the command line options is that it allows for multiple servers to be installed using the exact same options, making this an extremely repeatable process. When doing massive installations on large farms or installing servers on a regular basis, command line installation options are very important. When doing just one-off installations, which frankly is what's normally done with integration services, this is not so much a big deal. In summary, there are a couple of different installation options to meet all your various requirements. Not every one of the installation options is going to fit all your needs. Use a repeatable process whenever you need to and whenever you're going to be doing multiple deployments. It'll save you time and frustration as you ensure that each one of your installations will be exactly the same.